Okay, this is test administration. First of all, we need to discuss what are the steps in managing your test administration. Well, that all depends on what it tells you to do in the test manual. So you need to read that first. Now, do you read the entire test manual? Quite honestly, I've never known anyone who actually did that. But you do need to read the important parts. Administration, scoring. When you're looking at giving the test. Now, generally speaking, you would have already looked over the test to make sure of the reliability and validity. But when you're getting ready to score it, you don't have to reread those parts. You just need to be sure you understand administration and scoring. And what I always did was I would tag those pages and then highlight everything that needed to be done that was important on those pages. And that way you don't get lost, and you can also, make numbers, do this first, second, third. Make it as easy on yourself as possible. Practice, follow the directions that were given by the test developer. Don't deviate, because this is actually part of standardization. Practice administering that test at least once. And then you're going to want to establish a positive testing environment. Now, hopefully you'll be able to have like a small office where you can work. Small offices, I've found, generally work better because there's not as many things to distract your student. First of all, when you have the student in there, get familiar with them. Have them draw you a picture, talk about their favorite TV show, something to get them a little more comfortable in the new environment and more comfortable with you. Engage in a friendly conversation. This goes back to rapport. Explain to them why the testing is being completed, because a lot of times a change in routine can be very disconcerting for some children, especially if they already know they're having trouble. And the higher the stress level, the more disconcertment they're going to be feeling. So explain to them what's going on. All right, Johnny, I have found that you're just having a lot of trouble understanding some of the math concepts in class. So we're going to find out why. But in order for me to find out why, I need your help. Now, enlisting the student's help gives them a feeling of control. Even if they have no control over whether or not you do this or not, they still feel like they've had some control. And kids are naturally helpful. They like knowing that they've been able to help someone. And then tell them, when I get the results of all of this stuff that we're doing, we're going to have some activities, and I'm going to try and make this as fun as possible, and I'm going to give you some stickers, so that when you're finished with everything, you can take the sticker page home with you and show Mom and Dad how hard you worked at school today. And then, after you've explained to them what you're going to be doing in the test, don't call it necessarily a test. Call it activities. Test is a scary word, and students, by the time they're a quarter of the way through kindergarten, know that this is a scary thing. So let's keep it as positive as possible. Give them a brief introduction to the test, and that's really pretty easy because most tests will give you sample questions, and that way you can teach them the expectations of that test, and then begin testing in a calm manner. Now, one of the first things you have to do in getting ready for testing this child is we need to know how old they are. Exactly how old they are. We need to know their chronological age. How old are they in years, months, and days, in that specific order. So we have to calculate this correctly in order to interpret the test results correctly. And in order to do that, we're going to have to write the test day first, then subtract the student's date of birth. Now, I've tried to make this as clear as possible here, but we'll be going over this again in class. So, each column is in a different base. We've got the year, the month, and the day. Now, the test date was April the 2nd, 2003. The student was born October 8th, 1994. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to have to take a year away and give it to the month and day. To the month, and in order to do the days, we have to take 30 days away from that month. Just like a regular subtraction problem. So, we're going to 2003 minus 1, we now have 2002. 4 plus 12 equals 16. But then we have to take a month away from that to give over here to the days. So we have to take one more month away. So we have to add and then we have to subtract. So we wind up with 32 days. Because the average month is 30 days, even if we're talking about February. It is done the same way. So now we're ready to compute our problem. So 32 minus 8 is 24. And 15 minus 10 is 5. And then 2002 minus 1994 is 8. But then we want to round it up because we aren't going to really use those days. Very rarely, you'll find in a test, very rarely do you use the days. So we're going to round it up. So our chronological age rounded is 8-6, because when we round that up and we give it back over here to the month, we're going to have 6. All right? Now, we want to think about calculating the raw score. The first score that we're going to obtain during testing is the raw score. That's the score that you haven't done anything with. Just think about a piece of steak that you've just gotten home from the store. You haven't done anything with it. It is raw. You still have to fix it. And basically, this is just the number of items that a student answers correctly. So, how many ducks are there? They got that one correct. How many, count the big apples, how many are there? Then they got that one correct. But then when you said there are 5 geese, how many baby geese are there? They didn't really understand the concept that you were talking about. So they're kind of fuzzy on word problems or on subtraction. So we're going to have to figure out which one that is. So, but basically their raw score was 2. Then we want to look at basals and ceilings. Now the starting and stopping points of a test have to be determined so that unnecessary items are not administered. Otherwise, you are going to be testing that kid to infinitum. They're going to have to do the entire test. How would it be if you had a kindergartner who had to be tested on calculus? Makes no sense. So we have to have a starting place and we have to have a stopping place. The starting points are meant to represent a level where the student is going to be able to answer. So say it's, you see on the Woodcock-Johnson reading inventory, it will tell you student is 5 to 5.5, start at number 3. You know exactly where you're supposed to start. Now, if that student gets all 3 correct, you can go on with that. However, if they miss one, you're going to have to go back up. You're going to have to back up to the next previous place. So, the basal is the level at which the student can correctly answer all of the easier items. And typically, the manual is going to tell you that the student has to get however many number of items. Generally, it's 3. Sometimes it's 5. But most of the time, it's 3. And they have to get these right in a row. Not, as in the previous example, miss 2, get 1 right, or get 2 right, miss 1, get another one right. No, you can't do that. You have to have it exactly the way that the manual tells you to do. Now, once your basal has been established, the testing can proceed. If the student doesn't establish a basal, the test is probably too hard for that student, and you're going to have to find an alternative test. Now, let's go on. The starting point can be given as an age or a grade. Say the student is 6'4". Now, what does that mean? It means he's 6 years old, 4th month. Start with item 10. Student is 8.3, and it's supposed to be like this, but sometimes you'll see them like this. Start with item 50. Now, when calculating the raw score, all the items that appear before the established basal are counted as correct as long as they made their basal. So say you start at item 15, and that's your basal. That's where you're supposed to start. They get the next 3 correct, so you've set your basal. You count all 15 of those correct, because you assume that if you got those 3 correct, they would have gotten the others correct because they were supposedly easier questions. Now, ceilings are what we consider to represent the level that more difficult questions would not be passed. They would not get that answer correct. So typically the manual will state that a student must get however many of items in a row incorrect in order to establish a ceiling. So you might have, okay, correct, correct, incorrect, correct, 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 incorrect, incorrect, correct, incorrect, correct, incorrect, 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 and that's where you stop. And so you just have to keep an eye on those answers. All right? Now, once they hit the ceiling, you stop. So the basal and ceiling should not be the same number. And in fact, this can vary with each section of an assessment. And that's where you're going to see where the holes in the student's academic learning can be found. Because some students are going to be, double-digit addition will be fine. They will be able to go through all of those, and you're going to be going, okay, we went through the this whole section. But then when they get to subtraction, double-digit subtraction, even though it's just the opposite, this is a very difficult concept, and you might find that you stop much earlier